In the last part of the Flutter Connect 4 series, we enabled the board columns to hold different kind of coins, and we inverted the board columns lists in order to start the coins at the bottom and let them build up to the top. In our game controller, we implemented some functionality in order to remember which player's turn it is, and we implemented a playColumn function which holds the logic for inserting coins and for switching turns. Today we will focus on the rules which are responsible for victory and defeat. If a player achieves to connect 4 of his coins and the coins have equal color, then the player wins and the other player loses. And these coins can be connected in different directions, either horizontally, vertically or diagonal. In this video we will focus on the horizontal and vertical validation, and later on we will have a look on the diagonal validation, as this is much more complex. We're inside the game controller. Let's have a look on what we implemented so far. We have a playColumn method which is responsible for inserting coins into a specific column. Therefore we need the column number. Because our board is a list of lists, so we need the right list by using the right index. And then we save this list and we check if inside this list is the number 0. So we want to check if there's an empty cell, and if there's no empty cell, then we know the column is full and no more coins can be inserted. So that's why we check at first if there's a 0 inside this list, and if there's a 0, then we want to find the first appearance and save the index of the first 0. And then when we know where the first appearance of the 0 is, we want to replace it by the player's number, which we determine at the beginning. And this one depends on which player's turn it is. So if turn yellow is true, then our player's number will be 1, otherwise it will be 2. So we replace the 0 with either 1 or 2, depending on which player's turn it is. And after that we change the player's turn. So if player yellow was active, now player red is active. And after that we update the UI, and the UI represents now the updated board. And calling the update method, which is from the getX package, does nothing else than triggering the get builder, which we use here inside our UI. And right after this update method we want to check if there's a connection of 4 coins of the same color in either horizontal direction or vertical direction. So I came up with a solution that is probably not the best one, so if you have a better way to do this, then don't hesitate to comment me in the comment section, because I'm always seeking for improvement to get an even better coder. First of all, I'd like to check if there's a connection of 4 coins of the same color which are in horizontal direction. So therefore I'd like to create a method which I call checkHorizontals. And we know that inside our list of lists are 0s, 1s and 2s. And depending on what this method returns, we determine which player won, or if there is a horizontal connection of 4 coins at all. So if this method returns 0, we know there's no connection of 4 coins of the same color. If this method returns 1, then we know the player yellow connected 4 of his coins and won the game. And if it's a 2, then we know that player red won the game. So let's save the result of this method inside a variable which we call results horizontal. Let's implement this checkHorizontals method inside our game controller. So this one will return an integer, and the first thing I'd like to do is to create 2 counter variables. Int yellow in a row which starts by 0, and int red in a row. So those two ones will be incremented while we loop through the horizontal. And in order to loop through the horizontals, we need another list of lists, which will hold all the horizontal rows of the board. So let's create also a list of lists of integers called rows. And this one will start empty. And now somehow we have to get the horizontals from the board. Therefore, we create a for loop which counts from 0 to 6 or from 0 to 5, because we know that our board will always consist of 6 rows. Inside this for loop, let's create a final variable of list integer, which will hold the current row. And here I'd like to get the row list, and I'd like to create another method for that. And then if we have the row, we add it to the rows list. And of course we want the row of a certain index. That's why we have to provide the I. So now let's create the getRowList method as well. This one will return a list of integers, and it is called getRowList. This one accepts an integer, and inside that we create another variable rowList, which is empty, and another for loop, which will loop through the columns of the board. And now we loop through the columns of the board and get the entry at a certain index, which is provided by the row number. So if the row number is 0, then we get the first entry inside each column of the board. And all of those entries will be added to the row list in order to create a horizontal row. This one is sent back to the checkHorizontals method, where it gets added to the rows list. This is how we get all 6 rows in order to loop through them. So we take the row list and then we add the entry inside the column on a certain index. And at the end, we return the row list. And now we can go on with our checkHorizontals method. The rows list now consists of 6 rows, and we loop through those rows, and for each row we loop through the cells of this row. And inside this row we want to check if the current cell equals 1, and if that's true, then we increment yellow in a row. And also we set red in a row to 0. And if the cell is 2 or equals 2, then of course we do the opposite. We increment red in a row and set yellow in a row to 0. And if none of these cases is true, then we set both of those variables to 0. And this type of validation should only happen if yellow in a row and red in a row is less than 4. And if either yellow in a row or red in a row is equal or higher than 4, then of course we want to return the integer which represents the winning player. If yellow in a row and red in a row have not reached the maximum of 4, then of course we return 0 as a result. And now that our checkHorizontals method is finished, we can use it inside our playColumn method. We have the result inside our result horizontal variable, and now we check if the result horizontal equals to 1. If that is true, then we show a dialog with a title of yellow 1, and let's display a cell which holds the coin with the color of the winning player. And after this dialog is closed, we rebuild the board, and if the player 2 wins, we do the same thing, but here we of course check if the result horizontal equals 2, and we show the cell with a red coin. After rebuilding the board, we have to set the current player back to yellow. That's why we set turn yellow to true. This should happen if either player 1 or player 2 wins and the board gets rebuilt. And in order to show the changes inside the UI, we also have to provide the update method inside the build board method. And now finally, let's check if everything is working. Let's see what happens if we connect 4 yellow coins. Perfect, the yellow player wins. And if we put 4 red coins side by side, the red player wins. We are finished with the horizontal validation, and now we can start with the vertical validation. And don't worry, this one will be much shorter and easier, because we have already most of the code that we need for that in place. As you might have guessed, we can use most of the parts of the checkHorizontals method. So let's copy it and paste it right at the bottom of our game controller. Rename it to checkVericals, and for this one we don't need the rows and we don't need the for loop as well, as we are looping through the board itself. As I already explained in the previous part, the board is a composition of 7 board columns, and a column is represented by a list of integers. As a result, let's rename rows to board and also rename row to column, and now we're good to go. Back to our playColumn method, we create another variable, result vertical. This one saves the return value from checkVericals. We add this one to our if statements in order to check both validation methods. Finally, let's cut out this turn switching statement and remove it to the build board method, which in my opinion makes much more sense. Let's save this file and check if everything is working. Let's create a vertical connection of 4 yellow coins. Perfect. And now let's do the same thing with the red ones. And this also works perfectly fine. And also the horizontals are still validated correctly. In the next part of the series we implement the diagonal validation, which is much more complex than the previous ones. Let me know if this video was helpful and if you would like to see more content like this. If this is the case, then like and share it. And if you think this channel is worthy of support, then consider subscribing. And yeah, what else can I say? Have a nice day and hopefully until the next video.